The Tennessee Titans must get Cam Ward more weapons this offseason, and that means they need to use top resources in both free agency and the draft. We'll look at the options on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's show, we're going to talk about why Cam Ward needs more weapons, even though I think that's pretty obvious, who those weapons could be at the top of free agency and the top of the draft, and the Matt Nagy noise continues to get louder. Big time article dropped on Matt Nagy that we'll take a look at here. And we'll talk about some coaching candidates that I think can clearly be marked off the list for the Tennessee Titans. Before we get into all of it, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. The Tennessee Titans head coaching search is about to go into overdrive. If you want to be up to date on all the latest candidates, their strengths and weaknesses, all the ins and outs, make sure that you stay locked in with the Locked On Titans podcast. But again, we're going to talk about the coaching search, but I want to start with Cam Ward's need for weapons in the offseason, because one of my big takeaways coming out of the Tennessee Titans game against the New Orleans Saints was, boy, Cam Ward needs some of the weapons that Tyler Shuck has on offense, like a Jawan Johnson, like a Chris Olave, most importantly. Dear Lord, Cam Ward needs a number one type receiver that can consistently get open, give him options to make big explosive plays. Not only that, but the down-to-down consistency of having someone who can consistently get open. Right now, Alec Pierce and Van Jefferson are in the bottom 50 of separators at wide receiver in the NFL. Like, their average yards of separation are 50th or lower. You know, Chig does a good job getting separation with his speed in the slot. Chig Okonkwo can get some good separation at tight end. Gunnar Helm is average in that regard, and that's what I would expect from him. He's not, a clean separator or anything. He's a good route runner, can high point the ball. I have faith that Gunnar Helm can turn into the type of weapon that Cam Ward needs. But I don't think that Alec Pierce or Chig are going to all of a sudden blossom into a top 1 and 2 wide receiver. The Tennessee Titans need to go out and get Cam Ward some additional weapons at wide receiver, and they need to do it with some of their most expensive, highest capital that they have. Top draft picks, big contract in free agency. Like, they have to go out and do something. And I will tell you, coming into the middle of the season, like going into the bye week, I would not have told you that I think the Titans need to give out a $20 million plus contract at wide receiver. But you start to think about the situation, and I know that the counter will be, didn't we just do that with L'Jarius Sneed and Calvin Ridley? But here's my question. If the Titans just wouldn't have signed Calvin Ridley and L'Jarius Sneed, where they traded for Sneed and then gave him the contract, whatever. If they would not have acquired Calvin Ridley and L'Jarius Sneed, they didn't do those contracts. They didn't spend that money. They just kept the money. Would they be better right now? Would they have won more games over the last 2 seasons if they just kept that money in their pocket, didn't use it at all, didn't spend it on Calvin Ridley or L'Jarius Sneed? Probably not. They probably wouldn't have been any better. They wouldn't have won any more games by just not spending that money. And when you look at some of the options available, George Pickens at the top of free agency, Alec Pierce from the Indianapolis Colts, Romeo Doubs from the Green Bay Packers. I think those are the most realistic, and Pickens might not even make it to free agency. Pierce might not even make it to free agency. Like, we don't even know that for sure. Mike Evans is not going to play somewhere other than Tampa Bay. He's either going to retire or play in Tampa Bay, even though he's set to be a free agent. So Rashid Shaheed Would the Seahawks really let him walk after trading for him mid-season? I don't think so. Deebo Samuel, he's an okay player, but such a specific player. He's not a true wide receiver, and he's certainly not a separator like what Cam Ward needs. He's a yards after catch guy who's kind of a running back and had to be used in a very specific way this year by Cliff Kingsbury. Now, if the Titans bring in Cliff Kingsbury as their head coach and they want to bring in Deebo Samuel to continue running in that system, I'd accept it. But outside of that, what are we talking about? Wan'Dale Robinson? So here's the question. Would you rather give $20 million a year to Alec Pierce to be a deep downfield threat with a big catch radius and big hands and long arms and all of that for Cam Ward, which could help his deficiencies like we talked about on yesterday's show, and then roll with Chim DK in the slot and let him get better? Or would you rather not take the risk on a big-time contract with Alec Pierce and get a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson who plays in the slot, and then now you don't use Chim DK as much because they want to play in similar spaces? You know what I mean? Like, to me, I guess what I'm really trying to say is I would rather pay Alec Pierce or George Pickens, for that matter, $20 million a year. George Pickens higher than that, most likely. I would rather do that and swing big, because what are you going to do with the money anyways? The Titans have $100 million in salary cap, and I continue to say this. The reason that spending money on free agents is dangerous is because you may use all your money on free agents, and then you won't have enough money to re-sign your good players. That is not going to be an issue. That's why I pushed back when people said, oh, the Titans should have never signed Calvin Ridley. They should have never got L'Jarius Sneed. Well, it's not like they wasted that money on those guys and they could have used it elsewhere. There aren't a lot of good options in free agency. You can't just go get a Jamar Chase in free agency or an A.J. Brown in free agency. That's not how that works. So it's like, if they don't pay money for Alec Pierce, Romeo Doubs, George Pickens, whatever, if they don't do that, then there's just no reason to pay any wide receiver, because then you're just adding people who are not as good as Wan'Dale Robinson. And is that going to, are you going to go sign some of these guys? And are they going to be better than Chim DK and Alec Iomanor in year 2? No, probably not. So I would rather just draft more players than go get a mid-range option at wide receiver. So yes, it's an overpay. Yes, paying big in free agency rarely works, but there is no risk for the Titans because there's nobody else to pay, and there are no better options to go try at. And the Calvin Ridley contract and the L'Jarius Sneed contract, we're 2 years into those. Are those hurting the Tennessee Titans' ability to make moves? Do they not have cap space because they have bad contracts on the books? No, they have $100 million in cap space again. So those contracts, even though they didn't work out on the field, they didn't hinder the Titans financially. So I have actually come around on the idea of, sure, go out and spend big-time money at wide receiver. Go out and pay Alec Pierce $22 million a year. Go pay George Pickens $30 million. Whatever. What else are they going to do with the money? Cam Ward needs weapons. He needs talent. The Titans shouldn't have to worry about money right now. So what if they have to overpay for a player? They have buku bucks. So what if you're overpaying for a Ferrari if you're a billionaire? I want the Ferrari. Cam Ward just needs weapons, and there is truly no financial downside to getting him one of these guys in free agency. Now, I would take Pierce and Pickens light years ahead of anybody else. Quite frankly, rather than paying Rashid Shaheed, Romeo Doubs, Deebo Samuel, Wan'Dale Robinson, I would rather go trade a third-round or a second-round pick for Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's go buy low on Marvin Harrison Jr. Imagine if you were to get Marvin Harrison Jr., Alec Pierce, and then add another player like a Zachariah Branch in the mid-rounds of the NFL draft. KC Concepcion. How about that? Now you would have Pierce, Marvin Harrison Jr., Chim DK, Alec Iomanor, a rookie in the mid-rounds. That's a much better group. And heck, maybe you don't go pay Pierce because you go get Marvin Harrison Jr. and you say, you know what, that's our big addition. and then you add another wide receiver in the draft? I'm just saying, the possibilities are endless, but here's the point. The Titans have the budget, whether it's in the draft or in free agency, to overpay to ensure that they get Cam Ward some big-time weapons. There is no excuse, and even if you got to overpay, you got to do it, because I would rather overpay for talent than underpay for nothing. And that's what it comes down to. But with that being said, again, the noise continues to grow around Matt Nagy. His PR team is out there in full force, and we got a major article. And look, guys, you know I do not like the idea of hiring Matt Nagy, but he's probably the favorite to be the head coach, and there's some information in this article that I think makes it even more likely that Matt Nagy is hired. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The NFL season is in full swing, folks. There's nothing like being at the game, the crowd noise, the energy, cheering alongside other fans. Watching at home is great, but being in the stadium hits different. The frustrating part has always been getting tickets, waiting in queues, dealing with logins, watching the price change at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I pulled up the Game Time app recently to check out some upcoming NFL games and found great ticket options almost instantly. They have the best features in the industry. They have a panoramic view from your seat so you know what you're going to be looking at before you buy. Zone deals where you pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you get great value. They have upfront pricing, so the price that you see is what you pay, all backed by the Game Time guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. I talked about why Cam Ward needs more weapons, and I don't care what the Tennessee Titans gotta pay to get them. But with that being said, the other thing that could really help Cam Ward outside of weapons is better coaching. And I fear that the Matt Nagy connection to the Tennessee Titans grows even stronger by the day. There was an article dropped in The Athletic, a big profile on Matt Nagy, trying to basically reintroduce him as a head coaching candidate and reimagine his time with the Chicago Bears previously. Now, before I break down that article and all the different things in it and what it means to me, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. But the number one thing that stands out to me in this article is something that was said about Mike Borgonzi and Matt Nagy's relationship. Because if you remember earlier in the year when Mike Borgonzi did his press conference after the trade deadline, he talked about how one of the most important things for the next head coach is that he and the next head coach can work directly together, that they can be a partnership, that they can build together for years to come, blah, blah, blah. Well, in this Matt Nagy article on The Athletic, and it was written by, I want to give credit where credit is due here, but it was written by Dan Pompei of The Athletic. But he talked about Mike Borgonzi getting ready to interview to be a general manager. And it says here, quote, Nagy tries to develop young assistant coaches on the staff, sharing mistakes he made and conducting mock job interviews. He has helped Chiefs executives too. When then assistant general manager Mike Borgonzi prepared to become a general manager, he and Nagy talked through scenarios and bounced ideas off one another. Borgonzi became general manager of the Titans in 2025. I mean, look at that. Look at that. Like, that is right there. But again, this brings me back to my concern with Matt Nagy that Mike Borgonzi is going to put. What's more important? Let me put it this way. What's more important for the next Tennessee Titans head coach? That he's a great football coach or that he has a great relationship with the general manager? Of course, you would love to have both, but what's more important is the ability to coach football, not the ability to be buddies with the GM. If I had to choose between a guy who I know is a really good football coach or a guy who I know is going to work well with my general manager, I'm always going to take the guy who I know is a good football coach, because that is what is actually important here. Like, what are we talking about? You know, my car plays good music. I love my sound system in my car. It bangs. I love it. But I'm not going to use my car as more of a stereo than a car. What are we doing? What's more important? The car with the good stereo or the car that can actually get you from A to B and back to A again? People forget mentioning that. I got to get back to A eventually. So I just feel like this is a cart in front of the horse thing of where Mike Borgonzi could potentially, I hope he doesn't do that, but Mike Borgonzi could potentially value his relationship with Matt Nagy and their partnership together and how well they get along over Matt Nagy's ability to coach football. And quite honestly, this article tried to paint Matt Nagy as a guy who did a good job in Chicago and things just kind of didn't break his way. But I feel the opposite while reading this. A lot of this article was saying, oh, Matt Nagy's advice going into his first head coaching job was be you and to be himself, blah, blah, blah. And then by the end, it said he wasn't being himself. And by the end, he had a big problem with Allen Robinson, one of the team captains, and they weren't speaking to each other. And Matt Nagy, by the end, according to Allen Robinson and according to himself, was taking advice from too many people. He was getting some suggestions from here and there. He was giving up being the play caller. He was taking back being the play caller. He was giving it up again. This is a guy, like Brian Callahan, in my opinion, with no backbone. And a lot of people in Kansas City right now say that the reason that the Chiefs are struggling on offense since Matt Nagy came back is because they lost Eric Bieniemy, and Matt Nagy is just a yes man to Andy Reid. Now, in this article, it says that, Andy Reid says that Matt Nagy is the guy who gives him hard truth. Matt Nagy is the guy who pushes back and gives him the advice that maybe he doesn't want to hear sometimes. Matt Nagy is that guy who does those things for the Chiefs. But if you ask a lot of people around the Chiefs, it was Eric Bieniemy who was the bad cop in the building, and Matt Nagy and Andy Reid were the good cop in the building. They were the nice guys. He would go golfing with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce at all the different golf courses. He was their buddy. Matt Nagy is the dad who lets his kid eat ice cream for dinner every night because he wants to be his friend more than he wants to be his leader. This guy is not a leader. And this article is PR to try to make him look like, and Matt Nagy said, oh, he's learned from that. He's not going to take suggestions from people as much anymore. He's going to stick to his guns and follow. Man, if you had to learn to be that way, I'm sorry. You aren't going to be that guy no matter what. Like, I just can't believe that. And quite honestly, Andy Reid earlier this week was doing a press conference saying, I think Matt Nagy needs to be a head coach. I think he should have got an opportunity. Andy Reid says in this article that he believed Nagy would be an excellent coach. He thinks he'll be an even better one if he leaves again. Quote from Andy Reid, what I saw in 2018 was a coach of the year, and that's what I still see. There's a coach of the year in there. End quote. Listen, he won coach of the year in a year where his defense had 36 turnovers. His offense was 9th in points, but 21st in yards because they were benefiting from short fields because the defense was creating turnovers, and the defense was scoring some of those points as well that Matt Nagy's offense gets credit for. He had a top 10 offense. They were 9th in points, and a lot of those points came from a defense that had a historic turnover rate. That's 16 games, 36 turnovers. So I'm like, yeah, he was coach of the year, but he wasn't even the best coach on the staff that year. It was Vic Fangio, and when Vic Fangio left, the offense got significantly worse, the defense got significantly worse, and they never improved. It got worse every year after that. So it's like, Andy Reid is out here doing PR for Matt Nagy, and it makes me wonder, because Matt Nagy's contract with the Kansas City Chiefs is up at the end of the year. Now, I do believe wholeheartedly that the Kansas City Chiefs like Matt Nagy. The Kansas City Chiefs, the people in the building like Matt Nagy. There's a story about his family when he was in Chicago, and they went to one of their kids' soccer or football games because they have 2 twin boys, and one of the kids on the other team said, "You suck," just like your dad to one of his kids, and the coach on the other team said, "Oh, teach your sons something about running the football," because Matt Nagy ran the ball 7 times in a game one time and got roasted by the Chicago media. Another thing to be concerned about. Bottom 10 in the NFL in rushing attempts in back-to-back seasons when he went 8-8. And that's what caused him to give up the play calling duties multiple times, is the guy does not want to run the ball, refuses. He loves shotgun and all the stuff that's not in vogue in the NFL right now that we don't want Cam Ward doing. But anyways, so there's all this stuff in here. I think Matt Nagy's probably a good dude. He's probably a nice guy, blah, blah, blah. I think he's too much of a nice guy. That's what the Titans just had in Brian Callahan. They need a little piss and vinegar this time. They need a little bit of a jerk this time to keep accountability on this franchise. Like, that's what they need. And I have to tell you this, put my tinfoil hat on. I think everything I just said to you points to one thing. The Chiefs don't want Matt Nagy back, but they don't want to be mean to him and tell him, "We are not renewing your contract. We don't want you back." They want they desperately, Andy Reid, his buddy, who talked about cheeseburgers and ice cream with Matt Nagy all week when they won games and blah, 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 blah. I think that Andy Reid, his buddy, and the whole article is about how Matt Nagy looks up to Andy Reid. And where is anybody on Andy Reid's coaching tree who is succeeding in the NFL? Find somebody from Andy Reid's coaching tree who is out there doing a good job right now. Find him. Eric Bieniemy was his golden goose, we thought, and he has crashed and burned as a possible candidate because he's not well liked, is the answer. But anyways, the point is here that I think the Chiefs don't want Matt Nagy back as their offensive coordinator. They don't want Matt Nagy back in their offense. They know they need to move on from Matt Nagy and modernize their offense and make big changes. But they don't want to be mean to him, so they want him to get hired by somebody else to be a head coach, so it's not a big problem. And they're pushing and doing PR, and Reid is out there giving statements on Matt Nagy to try to get him a job in a down coaching cycle. And I'm sorry, but I certainly hope that the Titans aren't the team that falls for it, because he's best buds and was a study buddy with Mike Borgonzi. I'm sorry. Like, this article made me more concerned, not less concerned, about Matt Nagy. But with that being said, Matt Nagy's not getting crossed off the list anytime soon, but there are a couple names that we can cross off the list, or at least we should, and I'm going to go over those right now. All right, Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On Titans. We went over why Cam Ward needs weapons, why the Titans need to pay up to get him. We talked about the big update on Matt Nagy and the PR push to get him out of the building, in my opinion. But now we need to talk about a couple of guys who I think we can cross off the Tennessee Titans coaching list. I think we should be able to, whether because it's obvious or because we should, either way. Now, number one on that list for me is Mike McCoy. Anybody who is in my comments, who is making a case, who is leaving the open-ended possibility that Mike McCoy could be the full-time, long-term head coach for the Tennessee Titans after the season, you're done now, right? Like, that's over, right? I don't have to be nice with you anymore and be like, "Oh, well, I don't think that's possible." But, like, you're just going to stop asking me about it, right? People are going to stop saying that. It's not even going to be, like, brought up anymore. And Mike McCoy never was, never will be, never was a possibility that he was going to be the long-term head coach for this football team, and nothing has happened since he took over that would lead you to believe that that would be a good decision. Even in the Titans' wins, even in their improvements on offense and Cam Ward's improvements and all of that, even in the midst of all of that, there is not a chance that Mike McCoy was going to be this team's full-time head coach. And if you pay attention to everything like I do, which is why you stay locked into Locked On Titans, because literally every whisper on Twitter, every rumor, every report, every article, anything that moves, I got my eye on it, and I'm bringing it to you. But there have been multiple beat reporters for the Titans who are in the building every single day over the last couple of days saying, like, you know, these guys don't respect Mike McCoy. He doesn't inspire the locker room. You know, there are things behind the scenes and and it's just all since the day that he got the job. I said, I'm glad that Brian Callahan is gone. This team is better than what they were under Brian Callahan, but Mike McCoy is not. It's a 0% chance he is going to be the long-term head coach of this football team. And, you know, people love to point out when I get stuff wrong. But this went exactly how I expected. The Titans got better because Brian Callahan is probably the second worst head coach since the turn of this millennium. Since the year 2000, Brian Callahan is probably the second worst head coach in NFL history behind Urban Meyer. I truly do think that that's the case. Maybe like a Jim Tomsula, Steve Wilkes, David Culley. Is that the guy who got to coach the Texans for a year before they fired him? I mean, Brian Callahan is right there with those guys. So they got better under Mike McCoy, but Mike McCoy is still a terrible head coach. I compare it to this. It's grandparent parenting. Whether you're a parent or whether you're a kid who had grandparents. My mom loves anything goes at grandma's. Anything goes. Oh, of course, honey. Of course you can have this and have that. You get spoiled at grandma's house. Who actually disciplines you, teaches you right from wrong, gives you structure? Your parents. That's what it's supposed to be. I know for some of us out there, that was not the case. And trust me, I empathize if your parents were not giving you much structure in your life. But that's how it's supposed to be. Mike McCoy is coaching the team like a grandpa. Good job, young whippersnapper. Hey, here's another candy bar. Blah, blah, blah. You're doing good. The Titans need a parent to run the team. So, yes, when the parents are sick, let's take them over to grandpa's house, grandma's house. Let them watch the kid for the weekend while we get back to health. That can work for a short time, but long term, that's never going to work. So the honeymoon period is over for Mike McCoy. I hope that's the case for everyone who's listening, watching, enjoying the Titans or not enjoying the Titans either way this season. But another name that I think we could cross off the list is Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman, the head coach of Notre Dame, Fighting Irish. I never got to talk about it. There was a rumor or a report last week that the Titans were interested in Marcus Freeman. I think that it's clear now it was all just from his agency trying to get him a better contract with Notre Dame. That's how this works. Oh, my college client is considering the NFL. Next thing you know, the college coach gets a better contract from where he's at. It's all just negotiating in the media at the end of the day. But I actually, if I would have gotten to talk about it, I would have said that Marcus Freeman is the one college coach I would be interested in. He's a culture builder. He's a leader. He has experience as a player. I'm a firm believer in Marcus Freeman as the leader of a football program. I think he's going to end up being a very good NFL head coach whenever he decides to make that jump. But obviously with him recommitting to Notre Dame, we can cross him off the list. But here's the reality. He's getting paid more at Notre Dame than Amy Adams-Strunk is going to pay him to coach the Titans. He was never going to leave and come to the Titans. And high-profile candidates like that rarely going to pick the Titans because the Titans aren't going to pay up at the end of the day. It's just a reality of the situation. But Marcus Freeman, Mike McCoy off the list, and Arthur Smith, 6 points against the Browns. I don't understand the Arthur Smith love. Personnel deployment is a disaster. His offenses are always inconsistent. He's got Mike Tomlin as a head coach and still struggling to get into the playoffs. Arthur Smith is not the guy. He's not a leader. He's a guy who needs a leader above him for when he starts to act crazy, they can get him in line. I am not a fan of Matt Nagy. I do not want Matt Nagy. I did a whole episode say no to Matt Nagy. I don't like Matt Nagy. I don't want him hired. But I rate Matt Nagy over Arthur Smith. What are we doing here? You know? Arthur Smith has more talent on offense right now than what Matt Nagy had in Chicago. And, I mean, Arthur Smith had a lot of talent in the skill position players in Atlanta and wasn't as good as Matt Nagy was in Chicago. So, yeah, Arthur Smith, totally out. Ridiculous candidates. Marcus Freeman, Mike McCoy, Arthur Smith, cross them off the list forever, hopefully. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me today, folks. Crossover Thursday is tomorrow. Get into this Jacksonville Jaguars matchup with my guy Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jags. But as always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland. I'll see you guys next year. And this was Locked On Titans.